years old, and 10 minutes ago, I was named the Young Chef of the Year. But as I stepped onto the podium under the flash of hundreds of lenses, my vision suddenly went pitch black. The applause faded, replaced by terrified screams as I collapsed, bringing the magnificent stage crashing down with me. In my delirium, I heard doctors talking about a deep vein thrombosis caused by extreme overwork and stress. They called my parents, the people who should have been in the front row, but no one answered. 2 days later, waking up to the pungent smell of antiseptic, the first thing I saw was not my family's relieved smiles, but a photo on my brother's Instagram. The whole family was raising glasses on a luxury yacht off the Amalfi Coast with the caption, "Celebrating a major real estate sale. Finally, some peace and quiet without anyone nagging." They had sold the restaurant I gave my life to build at the very moment I was hovering near death. I lay there, the pain in my chest coming not from the surgery, but from the icy betrayal seeping into my marrow. The afternoon sun filtered through the hospital window, striking the cold intravenous tubes that looked like the invisible chains that had bound me for years. I remembered 4 weeks ago, the day everything started falling apart. I was standing in the cramped family kitchen, sweat pouring down my neck, my hands trembling from sleep deprivation as I tried to flip expensive steaks. My mother did not bother looking up from her stack of luxury travel magazines. She just casually ordered me to prepare a high-end menu for my brother Julian's party to celebrate his first Rolex. "Leo, remember to sear the foie gras exactly the way Julian likes it," my mother said, in a tone that allowed no argument. "You know how sensitive your brother's palate is." I looked down at my hands, covered in burn scars and tiny nicks, the result of 4 long years working 16 hours a day at the family restaurant. "I have the award ceremony next week, Mom." I tried to keep my voice steady. "I need a little time to prepare my speech." My mother finally looked up, but her gaze was full of annoyance and contempt. "You are always so good at managing on your own, Leo." She brushed me off. "Julian needs us more. He is not strong like you." Strong. That was the linguistic trap they used to nail me into the role of the devoted, unpaid servant. Because I was reliable, they assumed I would carry everything. Because I never demanded anything, they assumed I had no needs. That night, as a headache began to pound like a hammer against my skull, I called the only person who actually checked on me, Uncle Arthur. Arthur was my father's estranged brother, a self-made billionaire who had long ago cut ties with the family because he could not stand their greed. "Do not keep setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who will not even look at the flame, Leo," Uncle Arthur said in his deep, soulful voice. "I have watched you long enough to know you do not belong in that swamp. You have Grandma Eleanor's face, and you have her defiance, too." I didn't fully understand the weight of those words until he mentioned a mysterious legacy Grandma had left behind. But at that time, the pain clouded my judgment. I took a deep breath, fighting back the rising nausea, and went back to the piles of dirty dishes in the kitchen. I had no idea while I was pouring my soul into proving my worth, my parents were sitting in the living room whispering about selling my restaurant as if it were just an old, worthless trinket. They needed money to feed Julian's vain fantasies, and I, the son who always stayed silent and worked, was the perfect scapegoat. My heart rate on the monitor ticked in a steady rhythm, breaking the silence of the hospital room. I picked up my phone, staring at the 65 missed calls from my father that had appeared in the last few hours. He was not calling to ask if I was alive or dead. He was calling because Uncle Arthur had revealed the existence of the trust fund in my name, and now they were scrambling to get their hands on that money to cover the debts piling up after their lavish trip. My breath grew heavy as the final pieces of the truth fell into place. They thought I was a weakling, easily bullied. They thought I would keep nodding and smiling like a pathetic puppet, but they were wrong. That collapse on stage was not the end. It was the beginning of an overthrow they never dared to imagine. A quiet but fierce sense of power began to rise from deep within me. I was no longer Leo, the invisible son. I was the one holding the key to the survival of the very people who abandoned me. The pain vanished, replaced by a cold clarity. Their charade was over, and now my performance truly began. I lay motionless in the sterile white hospital room, closing my eyes to stem the hot tears threatening to spill over. In the darkness of my mind, I saw myself standing in front of Eleanor restaurant 4 years ago, the day my father put his hand on my shoulder and told me this would be our family legacy. I believed him. I gave every waking moment, from scrubbing kitchen floors at 3 in the morning to creating menus that delighted every guest, all in exchange for a nod of recognition that never truly came. Flashing back to 2 weeks before the collapse, I was standing at the cash register and saw an overdue payment notice from the bank. When I asked my father about it, he just waved me off and told me to handle the cooking. "Do not worry about the numbers, Leo," he said with a fake smile. "Just keeping the kitchen running well is enough." But I had no idea that while I was struggling to keep the restaurant alive, my parents were secretly draining the operating capital to pay off my brother Julian's gambling debts. Julian was a bottomless black hole. He never had to put his hands in dishwater, never had to endure the heat of the oven for 18 hours straight. He only showed up at the restaurant on the busiest Saturday nights, dressed in designer clothes bought with my blood, sweat, and tears, treating his friends as if he were the real boss. My parents not only failed to stop him, but encouraged it. They said Julian needed to build social connections, while I already had the kitchen for company. The height of the injustice was when my mother walked into the kitchen on a busy afternoon and handed me a stack of documents. "Leo, we need to restructure the loan to expand the restaurant," she said in a voice that was terrifyingly sweet. "Sign here. It is just an administrative formality." Because I trusted them so much and was so exhausted from working 36 hours straight, I signed my name without reading the fine print at the bottom. I did not know I had just signed a power of attorney allowing them to sell all the intellectual property and the Eleonora brand to my biggest rival, a local real estate mogul. Immediately after I finished signing, Julian walked in with the latest phone in his hand, bragging about the trip to Italy the whole family was about to take. I asked why I was not going along, and my mother just smirked, asking who would stay to look after the restaurant if everyone left. "You are the only one we can trust to keep things running," she said, as if it were a grand compliment. But in reality, they just needed me to stay behind and clean up the wreckage they were about to leave. The chest pain hit me again as I remembered the moment I discovered the truth. 1 week before the award ceremony, I received a call from a strange lawyer informing me that the lease on the restaurant premises had been transferred to someone else. When I confronted my parents, they showed no remorse. They said the restaurant was losing money and selling it was the only way to save the family from bankruptcy. The truth was, they sold it for $4,300,000 to pay for Julian and enjoy a vacation in Amalfi. That night, I broke down crying in the dry storage room, surrounded by the smell of spices and flour, the only things that never betrayed me. I called Uncle Arthur in total despair. Uncle Arthur listened quietly as I told the whole story, his voice remaining as calm as a winter lake. "Leo, do you know why your grandmother named that trust the Freedom Fund?" he asked. "Because she saw your father's greed since he was a child. She knew that one day you would need an exit that no one could block." Now, looking at the continuous missed calls from my parents on the phone screen, I feel a cold disgust. They are calling because Uncle Arthur told them my Freedom Fund is worth much more than the money they just made from selling the restaurant. They are calling because they have already blown that $4,300,000 in the casinos of Monaco and now are facing much scarier creditors. I look out the hospital window where the city lights are beginning to glow. I am no longer a sacrificial pawn in their game. I am the one holding all the most important pieces. My silence over the past few days was not due to weakness, but the silence before a storm that will wipe out everything they try to profit from at my expense. Julian, father, and mother, they thought they could leave me to die slowly in exchange for temporary luxury. But they forgot one thing. A chef knows best how to flip a ruined dish into a masterpiece of punishment. I turn off the phone, set it on the table, and smile for the first time in years. The plan to buy up their debts through Uncle Arthur's shell company is 100% complete. Tomorrow, when they walk into this hospital room with crocodile tears, they will not meet a pathetic son. They will meet their own new creditor. The hospital room door swung open the following afternoon with a piercing creak. My mother rushed in first, her face arranged in a perfect act of maternal concern. "Leo, my son, we came back as soon as we could," she cried out while trying to embrace me. I did not hug her back. I looked at the wall clock. It had been 5 days since I nearly died on that stage. "You came back as soon as you could," I repeated slowly, "after 5 days of me lying here alone." My mother hesitated for a moment, but quickly regained her fake composure. "The flights were delayed, and we did our best to arrange things," she lied without blinking. "But Instagram says you were raising glasses in Amalfi yesterday," I said, holding the phone screen in front of her face. The photo of Julian beaming on a yacht with a caption about no one nagging was clear as day. My mother's face shifted, but she immediately turned to anger to cover her shame. "Do not be so sensitive, Leo. Julian worked hard and he needed a vacation," she snapped. My father entered after her, unable to look me in the eye. Julian came last, carrying shopping bags from the most luxurious boutiques in Italy. He carelessly tossed the bags onto the hospital sofa and looked at me like a broken toy. "You look better than I expected," Julian said mockingly. "Anyway, we cut the trip short for you, so you should be grateful." My heart went cold as I realized that even after life-saving brain surgery, I was still just an inconvenience to them. My father cleared his throat and moved to the main point they cared about. "Leo, we need to talk about the trust fund Uncle Arthur mentioned," he said with visible urgency. "That money belongs to the family, and we need it to solve some of Julian's financial troubles." I looked at my father, the man who had silently allowed my mother to drain my pockets for 4 years to feed my brother's vanity. "You sold my restaurant for $4,300,000, I said in a terrifyingly calm voice. "Where did that money go?" The three of them looked at each other in confusion. "Julian had some bad luck with crypto investments in Monaco," my father muttered. Just then, Uncle Arthur walked into the room with an elegant lawyer in a black suit. His presence made the room temperature feel like it dropped 10 degrees. "Douglas, Pamela, you two have not changed a bit," Uncle Arthur said with contempt. "Instead of asking about your son's health, you come here to tear apart the money he had to trade his life for." My mother tried to scream that this was a private family matter, but Uncle Arthur simply pulled out a folder. "This is a list of the debts that Julian and Douglas's company are carrying," he said. "It totals $5,200,000, and all of these debts were just purchased by an anonymous company whose legal representative is Leo." The room fell into a dead silence. My parents looked at me like a stranger, someone they could no longer control. Julian dropped the phone from his hand onto the floor. You bought our debt?" he stammered. I looked directly into my brother's eyes, the child who had always been pampered at the cost of my pain. "That is right," I said. "From this moment on, I am no longer your servant or your ATM. I am your creditor." A heavy silence smothered the hospital room, so thick you could hear Julian's heart racing. My mother was the first to break the tension with a forced, shaky smile. She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away. "Leo, you are joking, right?" she said, her voice trembling. We are family. You cannot treat your own parents like total strangers who owe you money." I looked directly into her eyes, where not a single spark of warmth remained. "Is family what you call it when you leave me for dead just to drink wine on a yacht?" I asked. "Is family when you secretly sell the restaurant named after my grandmother to fund Julian's lifestyle?" My father tried to reclaim his authority by shouting that they had raised me and I owed them respect. But Uncle Arthur cut him off by holding up a receipt. "Douglas, you used the money intended for Leo's tuition to remodel your kitchen and buy handbags for Pamela," he said. "You did not raise him. He has been raising himself and the rest of you for the last 4 years." I was discharged from the hospital 2 days later. Instead of returning to a house built on lies, I moved into a small apartment located directly above my old restaurant. With the legal support of Uncle Arthur, I made a move they never saw coming. I used my rights as a creditor to demand immediate payment on all overdue debts. When they could not pay, I executed a foreclosure on the family mansion and Julian's luxury car. On the morning of the eviction, my mother called me, sobbing hysterically. "Leo, are you really going to leave your parents on the street?" she choked out. I took a deep breath and told her I was not putting them on the street. I was simply taking back what they had stolen from my future. I had arranged a small rental apartment for them on the outskirts of town, enough to live on but without the fake luxury. "Julian will have to work to pay that rent. He has never worked a day in his life. He will die," my mother shrieked. "Then he should learn to survive the way I did," I replied and hung up. The real revenge began when I reopened my restaurant at the same location under a new name, Eleanor's Legacy. I invited back all the old staff members my father had mercilessly fired and gave them higher wages. On opening day, the place was packed. People came not just for the food, but because the story of my rise from the wreckage had spread across the city. That evening, Julian showed up at the back door of the restaurant looking haggard and messy in his old clothes. He begged me for a job, anything at all, because other creditors were chasing him and he had nowhere else to go. I handed him an apron and a scrub brush. "You can start by scrubbing the kitchen floors every night," I said. "If you do well for a month, I will let you assist in the kitchen." Julian looked at me with pure hatred, but he still had to take the apron. For the first time in his life, he had to learn the value of $1 through his own hands. I stood in the kitchen, smelling herbs and wine, feeling a sense of true freedom. I had taken back the restaurant, reclaimed my dignity, and most importantly, found myself again. I no longer needed validation from people who did not appreciate me. My payback was not about causing them physical pain. It was about stripping away the power they used to suppress me and forcing them to face the reality they had avoided for so long. 6 months after the grand opening, Eleanor's Legacy has become a new icon in the culinary world. I sit in my small office, looking down at the kitchen operating as rhythmically as a symphony. Julian is down there, drenched in sweat by the dish pit. He has lost a lot of weight, and his hands, which once only knew how to hold a wine glass, are now hardened with calluses. He no longer looks at me with eyes of hatred. Instead, there is a quiet submission. Sometimes, the best punishment is not pushing someone to the brink, but forcing them to rebuild with their own hands what they once looked down upon. My parents still live in the small apartment on the outskirts. My father found a part-time accounting job, and my mother began attending therapy sessions at my request, if she wished to continue receiving her monthly allowance. Last week, she sent me a 3-page handwritten letter, and for the first time, she did not ask for money. She apologized for seeing the shadow of Grandma Eleanor in me, and for using the wounds of the past to torment her only son, who had always loved her. I read the letter and felt a massive weight lifted off my chest. I am not sure if I have fully forgiven her, but I am at peace. Uncle Arthur walked into the office, handing me an old wooden box he found in Grandma's storage cellar. Inside was a collection of handwritten letters tied with a blue silk ribbon. I opened the top letter, the slanted handwriting appearing clearly. "To my dearest grandson," she wrote, "I knew that this life would not be easy for a sensitive and talented soul like yours. Those closest to us are sometimes the blindest to your light. But remember, you are never invisible to those who truly love you. This money is not for you to buy luxury, but for you to buy the right to say no to those who do not appreciate you." My throat tightened as I read those words. Grandma had seen me before I even recognized myself. She had prepared an exit for me because she knew I would be backed into a corner. The truth is, real love always leaves a trace, and I found it in these letters, in Uncle Arthur's support, and in the staff who share my passion every day. I realized that I no longer need to prove anything to my parents or Julian. My success is no longer driven by resentment, but by a love for the art of cooking and respect for myself. I have learned to love the face that resembles my grandmother, to love the resilience that helped me cross the line between life and death. Dear friend, if you are feeling invisible in your own family, if you are giving everything and receiving only indifference in return, remember that you are not alone. You have value far beyond anyone's recognition. Never set yourself on fire to keep people warm who will not even look at your flame. Learn to build that fire for yourself, and the people who truly appreciate you will find their way to its warmth. If Leo's story touched your heart, or if you have a story about rising up after betrayal, please leave an "I am strong" comment below. I read every single one of your comments, and it is a huge motivation for me to keep sharing these stories. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for the Still Waters Payback channel so we can spread the power of justice and self-respect together. Thank you for listening until the very last second. I will see you in the next story.